Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory. Today, I am going to do a voiceover, but sharing some information as pictures, location, and a little bit of the area, how things looked, and a lot of details about this case. I've been trying to record this video for about 3 days, but they are still working on that pipe, and if the machine is not here, you can still hear handles and people talking loudly. So I am trying to keep the dogs quiet, not barking, and I'm also kind of hiding the microphone in a small closet to try to make it as quiet as possible. When I finally move, I have a little studio that I worked or had to continue to work on, and it will be a different setting, easier to record. But right now, I do what I can. It's just a busy time of the year, and most construction things are happening, and not ASMR kind of thing. However, today we're gonna talk about the Chowchilla kidnappings. This was a requested video, so thanks to everyone that takes the time to share some of those cases that you want to feature here on the channel. Chowchilla is a place in California, a town in California, and completely different of what it looked at the time that this happened in 1976. Still a small town feeling, a close community, and a lot of people referred to Chowchilla as a cow town. This was a small community where people looked out for each other, trusted each other, and it was that period of time where most people felt safe in their houses or in general, including their cars, and would leave everything unlocked. Now, everything changed in Chowchilla by July 15th, 1976. This was a hot summer day, and kids were in summer school. Now, I am not sure if this was more of a keep the kids entertained kind of thing, but I know that all the kids would do activities together from all different grades. Of course, this is a small small town where we're moving, you realize that classrooms sometimes are even shared between the grades because of the small number of students in the entire school. This was something like that. This particular day, they were going to the town swimming pool, and this was the swimming pool that everyone went to. They were going to spend all their school day there and enjoy getting wet, playing with each other, and overall, very fun activity they were doing as a school, I would say, because the oldest student was 14, and I think there were others that were as young as 5 years old. Now, they spent the day there, and then they get back in the bus. The bus driver was the usual one. His name was Edward Ray. He was described as a nice man, gentle, sweet guy with the kids. And as soon as they got back in the bus, they started to kind of sing and laugh. They opened the windows and trying to let in the air. They did their normal stops, and some kids got out, which, by the way, I find that so interesting in this case, and you'll see why in a minute. But in the end, they continued to drive until they stopped at a stop sign to go around a white van. This white van, according to the driver, looked like it was broken down in the middle of the road. Edward would have never guessed what they were trying to do. So he opened the door and he probably asked something that was not described, but apparently the guys that were in that van came out with guns. The first one to get in the bus went directly to the driver and pushed him to the back of the bus. The second man gets in the bus with a shotgun, and that is when the panic started for the little kids. They were scary looking. They had a pantyhose over their faces, and you could kind of tell, their hair color, maybe the color of their skin, but you couldn't make their faces. And during an interview in one of the scared for their lives for as long as they lived until this point. Now all of a sudden they are overwhelmed with this feeling that was not normal. In total, there were 26 children, plus the bus driver, who, for the rest of the town, just vanished. Now, at this point, we have 3 masked men, one with a shotgun. The other one is a driver, or the one that will be driving the bus, and another one that will be following behind. They drive for a while until they get to an area off the road and into a dry riverbed. The bushes around there were so tall that it covered the vase perfectly. And in that same place, there was another van. This one was green. Now we know all these details, and not years later, but after the fact. There were some recordings of the children telling everything that I'm sharing with you today. So the 3 armed men decided to put the children and transfer them from the bus to the 2 vans. They were careful enough to ask the kids to jump from the bus to the van because they didn't want to leave footprints. The vans were prepared. They had the windows painted dark, and then there was wood paneling covering the windows. It was a terrifying experience for those young kids, who some of them couldn't stop crying hysterically, while others kind of insinuated to the kidnappers that they were going to be in big trouble if they didn't let them go, that his dad would be really mad at them. They were from different backgrounds, different ages, and it was very I don't know, I didn't even know how to describe it, but it was very chaotic and all over the place. Yet the kidnappers had a plan. Now, by this time, Jennifer's mom and dad came back from work, but Jennifer and her little brother were not there. It was a mess. Now everyone knew that their kids didn't make it home. And they knew that they actually left the pool, and that they had enough time to make some stops before vanishing. Everyone was looking for them, and the small town police department decided to get help from the state police and whatever agency had time and resources to pour into this was hidden in this riverbed because the only way to see it was from the air. Now, remember that they made the kids jump from the bus to the van, but they still found the tire marks showing that another vehicle backed up to the door and that they probably moved them to this other vehicle. By now, this seemed like a mass kidnapping. Parents gathered and talked to the FBI. That's when everything became a little bit more real. Back in the van, children they were crying, they were sad, and the older kids were comforting or helping cope with the situation to the little ones. And they spent 12 hours in that van, or in those vans, because they were put into two different ones. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know if they were going to see their parents again. And it was 12 hours of pure terror. When they arrived, when they finally stopped, one of the kidnappers takes Ed, the bus driver, and then little by little they took the kid next to the door until they finally got everyone out. As they were moving out, they were asked their name and their age. The kids that remained for a while inside the van waiting to be taken, they really had no idea if they were taking them and killing them somewhere else. This was a guy taking them one by one. When they finally got everyone out, and the last one made it, they had to go down to through this wooden ladder that went to an old truck trailer that, and this is the kicker here, it was buried. Inside, everyone was safe up until this point. The kidnappers left water, some food, cereals, and they made some holes so they would go to the bathroom there. Since they were underground, they also had some fans. When they were all together again, that was the good thing. But then the kidnappers took the ladder and said, "We will be back." They covered the opening with something super heavy, and everything went pitch dark. Basically, they buried soon if they wanted to survive. So he recruited the oldest boy in the bus. His name is Mike Marshall, and he was 14 years old. Together, they started to look for a way out. And they asked the little kids to go to sleep. But nobody could. They were crying. They thought they were going to die. This became the largest kidnapping in US history. 12 hours passed. At this point, the fans stopped working. There was no more food, and the roof was caving in. It was collapsing, and they knew that they either got out somehow, or they were going to be buried in that old truck trailer. Now, Michael and stacked mattresses that they were put there for the kids, and it ended up pushing Michael to the top. He could reach the cover, but it was very, very heavy. Apparently they not only put this covering, but they put 100-pound batteries on top of it. And then they put a wooden box on top. And then they put dirt to cover it. So basically, Michael, this tiny, and I'm not saying small as far as height, but not the strongest boy, 14-year-old boy, had to not only move that covering, but lift those batteries, and just to find that there is even more and more things in his way. After trying for a really, really long time, Ed pushes Michael through a 6-inch hole that he made, or that he managed to move the covering. He gets on top and he starts hitting and pounding on this box that was on top. He had to dig and dig around it. And according to some of the kids that were inside, Michael was exhausted, but he kept going. Some people said that he was so terrified that his adrenaline kept him going. He ended up getting to the top. He could see the sun. He could feel the air. And he crawled out of the hole, not knowing if the kidnappers were going to be there waiting for him. But nobody was outside. They looked like a sand dune, and they were camouflaging in this big place that didn't seem like much. Where were they? At this point, they've been on this in this hole for about 16 hours. And one by one, they started to come out of the hole. And the bus driver was terrified to take the next step because they could hear machinery, equipment, and they soon realized they were at a quarry. This quarry was in Livermore, California, about 100 miles away from Chowchilla, California. They talked to the employees who couldn't believe this guy coming from a hole with a bunch of kids. Luckily, everyone helped and they called the police. The police arrived and took every kid and the bus driver to Santa Rita Rehab Center. At the time, don't know if it still is, but at the time was a local jail. They put them in some classroom-looking rooms. They gave them fruit, soda, clothes, but grown-up clothes, so they look a little bit weird, as they said. They were examined by doctors and they ended up talking to the police for about 4 hours. The party started here. Now you're gonna hear some background noises, but anyways, the kids started to have PTSD. I mean, they had nightmares. They were lined up and shot. Some kids had nightmares that they were falling down into this hole. I mean, and all this was going on as the police was investigating, and they were taking out the truck van out of the hole where the kids were staying. They investigated everyone in the quarry. They needed to find who did this, who had access to this maybe after hours. And that's where they realized that the son of the owner was one of those people that they were interested in. His name is Frederick Woods. He was 24 years old and he was seen by security guards digging a hole in the quarry months before the kidnapping. Now, if you're thinking, well, how did, I think 4 other people had keys. But Fred had a record. 2 years earlier, he was charged with grand theft auto. Not only him, but 2 other guys that would match the description of the security guards, James and Richard Schofield. Now, Fred is, again, the son of the quarry owner, and James and Richard were part of this very wealthy family, as Frederick was. Their family lived in the San Francisco suburbs, and because of the family and because of who they were, even though they were charged with grand theft auto, the 3 of them got out with a fine and probation. Later on, it was said that at the time, if you were wealthy, young, white, you had chances of getting away with a lot. And that was the district attorney saying that. So the police gets a search warrant to search Fred's dad estate. And they found one of the guns. They also found a document that happened to be the plan of how they were going to do it. And because of the dates, they realized that they've been planning this for 1.5 years. So this is not something that was the spur of the moment. They had almost 2 years in the making, coming up with in that plan. They had a column for if things go wrong. They had a ransom note. The request for $5 million from the state of California. Well, you are probably wondering, like I was, why didn't they contact the police then? If that's all they wanted, money. Well, they tried, but the lines were busy with everything that was going on and the kids being missing. A lot of people called and called and called the police station. So the kidnappers couldn't go through. So they decided, these knuckleheads, to take a nap. And when they woke up from their nap, they saw that the kids were already out and with the police. Now, James and Fred. Fred is the son of the quarry owner, and James is the, I think, is the older brother of Richard, the other one involved. James and Fred tried to flee, but Richard turned himself in. The police ended up catching Fred trying to go to Canada, actually. And now they had the 3 responsible ones. But they needed proof. So they did lineups with voice recognition, and the kids and bus driver would have to agree on, okay, is this the voice of the guy that told you to do this or that? And they weren't recognized. But the question here is, why would wealthy boys do this for money? Apparently, James and Richard were in serious debt. And Fred was needing money. They decided to do this with children because they don't fight back. And they knew that the state of California would pay a lot for these kids. Later on, it was said that the brothers didn't want to be part of it, but were convinced into doing this. It also was later on said that Fred was not only the mastermind, but was described as a psychopath. They had overwhelming evidence, so the 3 of them pled guilty to 27 counts of ransom and robbery and 8 counts of bodily harm. 37 counts, not so much. It would have given them some time, but not life with no possibility of parole. The kids had to face the abductors, and this was about a year and a half later. They had to give their testimonies and all this to finally put away this trio. They all got life in prison without a possibility of parole. Michael was hailed as a hero, taken to Disneyland, as most of the kids. But 4 years after they were sent to prison, they appealed the bodily harm charge, and it was overturned because the amount of bodily harm wasn't enough for the charge. So they were all resentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole every 2 years. So 6 years after the kidnapping, the parole hearing started and continued. This led to a lot of, angry children, I guess. One of them that was, I think, was only 6-year-old when this happened, Larry. By the time that he was 15 years old, he was sent to a youth offender facility. By the age of 21, he was doing meth, crack, acid, and he was described as an angry, very angry guy. Michael Marshall, the hero, the 14-year-old boy that got everyone out, decided to leave Chowchilla and become a rodeo cowboy. He said it himself. He was mostly drunk, and he felt like one day he was 18 years old, and then he was drunk and passed out and woke up at 48. He didn't know what he did with his life. Now, these are only a couple of examples of the consequences of this kidnapping on some of the kids. But in June of 2012, Richard, the younger brother, got paroled 36 years after the kidnapping. 3 years later, James was paroled. And according to the information that I can find, they got never in trouble again, nor went to prison. Now, Fred Woods, it's another story. He continued to have bad behavior in prison. There was this DA that said in one of the documentaries that bad behavior keeps him in jail. Now, you're probably wondering what kind of bad behavior. Well, he breaks even the prison's laws. And they found him several times with porn in cell phones. So if he can't be made into, obeying, if they can't really keep an eye is he going to do in society? He was denied parole, and I mean, every single time that he asked for it. So, the brothers did end up being free almost 40 years after. But the consequences that and the scars that they left in these children are forever. Larry, the one I mentioned who was lost in drugs and in a rehab center, said that the healing continues. His story is a little bit different from the rest. Larry is a handyman and he's also a pastor. He's been sober for many, many years. But he said that even knowing God and even doing good as he was doing, his resentment was killing him. So he felt the need to visit the brothers in jail before they got out and forgave them. I don't know if he did it with Fred too. I'm assuming he also did it with Fred. But I'm going by articles on this piece that they basically feature at the end of a documentary. On the other hand, Michael Marshall, the 14-year-old hero, he doesn't want to even think about the kidnappers. But he's doing better. He got a therapy dog that saved his life, and he's been sober for about 8 years at the time that he gave this interview. Jennifer Brown, the girl that gave the most details, the one that was in the bus with her little brother, said that for her it was very hard to lose her brother. You see, her brother survived the kidnapping, but later on died. And even though I didn't research the reason why he died, she mentioned that that made her a little bit angry and rebellious. That she started being so scared that she couldn't sleep without a nightlight. But she still managed to form a family, to get a good career, and to try to leave everything in the past. The hardest thing for her was to understand her brother's passing after this tragedy. And I could go on with different testimonies on these children that were kidnapped back in 1976. But they share one thing, and that is that it changed their lives forever. I think that having a healthy fear and respect is always a good idea. However, when you're raised in an area where there is nothing to be afraid of, or at least you don't think so, it makes it harder to understand why you should. But fear is part this or that you wouldn't do in any other situation. Fear feeds your adrenaline, and it makes you do things like Michael that saved everyone that day. Michael and Ed, of course. As a 14-year-old boy, I don't know if he knew that he had to move those 100-pound batteries, if he knew that there was another box, if he, under normal circumstances, would he be, if this was a test, would he do it? Or was this part of his fear and survival instinct? In the end, we only see 3 wealthy boys that were bored out of their minds, that had too much time in their hands, so they decided to work on a plan that took them a year and a half. Some people say that it was only Fred's plan, and that he basically recruited the brothers. But the scars that they left on each and every one of those kids, the feeling of being buried alive, which is something that I believe most people don't want to experience, or maybe is some people's worst nightmare. They were little kids and they were buried alive. They experienced fear for the first time. And this became something that they will never forget. And will be part of that fear compartment in their brain and in themselves forever. So even though this is a happy ending where everyone went back home, had dinner with their families, and had a second chance at life, consequences are things that you cannot take back. You can make really bad choices, but you then have to live with the consequences. And when the consequences affect other people, you have to think over and over and over again. Because humans are not like computers you can delete, and it's like it was never there. Humans are a bit more complicated. Let me know if you knew about this case, if you have something that you'd like to add. Again, thank you so much to everyone that chooses to recommend cases. It helps a lot.